How moving the scene there in the gathering twilight, the last glimpse of Erin, the touching chime of those evening bells, and at the same time a bat flew forth from the ivied belfry, through the dusk, hither, thither, with a tiny lost cry. And she could see far away the lights of the lighthouses, so picturesque she would have loved to do with a box of paints, because it was easier than to make a man. And soon the lamplighter would be going his rounds, past the Presbyterian church grounds and along by shady Tritonville Avenue, where the couples walked, and lighting the lamp near her window, where WHYY used to turn his freewheel, like she read in that book The Lamplighter by Miss Cummings, author of Mabel Vaughan and other tales. For Gertie had her dreams that no one knew of. She loved to read poetry, and when she got a keepsake from Bertha Supple of that lovely confession album with the coral pink cover to write her thoughts in, she laid it in the drawer of her toiletable, which, though it did not err on the side of luxury, was scrupulously neat and clean. It was there she kept her girlish treasure trove, the tortoise-shell combs, the Child of Mary badge, the white rose scents, the eyebrow line, her alabaster pouncet box, and the ribbons to change when her things came home from the wash. And there were some beautiful thoughts written in it, in violet ink, that she bought in Healy's of Dame Street, for she felt that she too could write poetry, if she could only express herself like that poem that appealed to her so deeply that she had copied out of the newspaper she found one evening around the pot herbs. Art Thou Real, My Ideal, it was called, by Louis J. Walsh, Mara Felt. And after, there was something about twilight. Wilt thou ever? And oft times the beauty of poetry, so sad in its transient loveliness, had misted her eyes with silent tears, for she felt that the years were slipping by for her, one by one, and but for that one shortcoming, she need not fear no competition, and that was an accident coming down Docky Hill, and she always tried to conceal it. But it must end, she felt. If she saw that magic lure in his eyes, there would be no holding back for her. Love laughs at locksmiths. She would make the great sacrifice. Her every effort would be to share his thoughts. Dearer than the whole world would she be to him, and gild his days with happiness. And there was the all-important question, and she was dying to know, was he a married man, or a widower who had lost his wife, or some tragedy like the nobleman with the foreign name from the land of song had to have her put into a madhouse, cruel only to be kind. And even if, what then? Would it make a very great difference? For everything in the last, indelicate, her foreign-bred nature instinctively recoiled. She loathed that sort of person, the fallen woman off the accommodation walk beside the Dodder, that went with the soldiers and coarse men, with no respect for a girl's honour, degrading the sex and being taken up to the police station. No, not that. She would be just good friends, like a big brother and sister, without all that other in spite of the conventions of society, with a big S. Perhaps it was an old flame he was in mourning for, from the days beyond recall. She thought she understood. She would try to understand him, because men were so different. The old love was waiting with little white hands stretched out, with blue appealing eyes. Heart of mine, she would follow her dream of love, the dictates of her heart that told her he was her all in all, the only man in all the world for her, for love was the master's guide. Nothing else mattered. Come what might, she would be wild, untrammelled, free. Canon O'Hanlon put the Blessed Sacrament back into the tabernacle, and genuflected, and the choir sang Laudet Dominium Omnis Gentes, and then he locked the tabernacle door because the benediction was over, and Father Conroy handed him his hat to put on, and Cross Cat Eddie asked wasn't she coming, but Jackie Caffrey called out, "Oh, look, Sissy," and they all looked, and it was sheet lightning. But Tommy saw it too over the trees beside the church, blue and then green and then purple. "It's fireworks," Sissy Caffrey said, and they all ran down to the Strand to see over the houses and the church. Helter-skelter, Edie with the push-car with baby Boardman in it, and Sissy holding Tommy and Jackie by the hand so they wouldn't fall running. "Come on, Gertie," Sissy called. "It's the bazaar fireworks." But Gertie was adamant. She had no intention of being at their beck and call. If they could run like Rossies, she could sit, so she said she could see from where she was. The eyes that were fastened upon her set her pulses tingling. She looked at him a moment, meeting his glance, and a light broke in upon her. White-hot passion was in that face, passion silent as the grave, and it had made her his. At last they were left alone, without the others to pry and pass remarks, and she knew he could be trusted to the death, steadfast, a sterling man, a man of inflexible honour to his fingertips. His hands and face were working, and a tremor went over her. She leaned back, far to look up where the fireworks were, and she caught her knee in her hands so as not to fall back looking up. And there was no one to see, only him and her, when she revealed all her graceful, beautifully shaped legs like that, subtly soft and delicately rounded. And she seemed to hear the panting of his heart, his hoarse breathing, because she knew too about the passion of men like that, hot-blooded, because Bertha Supple told her once in a dead secret, and made her swear she'd never, about the gentleman lodger that was staying with them out of the Congested Districts Board, that had pictures cut out of the papers of those skirt dancers and high kickers. And she said he used to do something not very nice that you could imagine sometimes in the bed. But this was altogether different from a thing like that, because there was all the difference, because she could almost feel him draw her face to his, and the first quick hot touch of his handsome lips. Besides, there was absolution, so long as you don't do the other thing before being married, and there ought to be women priests that would understand without your telling out. And Sissy Caffrey too sometimes had that dreamy look in her eyes, so that she too, my dear, and Winnie Rippington, so mad about actors' photographs, and besides, it was an account of her, that other thing, coming on the way it did. And Jackie Caffrey shouted to look. There was another, and she leaned back, and the garters were blue to match on account of the transparent, and they all saw it, and they all shouted to look. Look, there it was. And she leaned back ever so far to see the fireworks, and something queer was flying through the air, a soft thing, to and fro dark, and she saw a long Roman candle going up over the trees, up in the tense hush, and they were all breathless with excitement as it went higher and higher, and she had to lean back more and more to look up after it, high, almost out of sight, and her face was suffused with a divine and entrancing blush from straining back. And I could see her other things too, nainsook knickers, the fabric that caresses the skin better than those with petty wit, the green 4 and 11 on account of it being white. And she let him, and she saw that he saw, and then it went so high it went out of sight a moment, and then she was trembling in every limb from being bent so far back that he had a full view high up above her knee, where no one ever, not even on the swing or wading, and she wasn't ashamed, and he wasn't either, to look in that immodest way like that, because he couldn't resist the sight of the wondrous revealment, half offered like those skirt dancers, behaving so immodest before gentlemen, looking, and he kept on looking. She would fain have cried to him, chokingly held out her snowy, slender arms to him to come to feel his hips laid on her white brow, the cry of a young girl's love, a little strangled cry wrung from her, that cry that has rung through the ages. And then a rocket sprang, and bang shot blind bank, and oh, then the Roman candle burst, and it was like a sigh of oh, and everyone cried oh, in raptures, and it gushed out of it, a stream of rain gold hair threads, and they shed, and they were all greeny dewy stars, falling with golden, oh so lovely, oh soft, sweet soft. Then all melted away dewily in the grey air, and all was silent. She glanced at him as she bent forward quickly. A pathetic little glance of piteous protest, of shy reproach, under which he coloured like a girl. He was leaning back against the rock behind Leopold Bloom, for it is he stands silent with bowed head before those young guileless eyes. What a brute he had been. And again, a fair, unsullied soul had called to him, and wretch that he was, how had he answered? An utter cad he had been, he of all men. But there was an infinite story of mercy in those eyes. For him too a word of pardon, even though he had erred and sinned and wandered. Should a girl tell? No, 1,000 times no. That was their secret, only theirs, alone in the hiding twilight, and there was none to tell, only theirs. And there was none to tell save the little bat that flew so softly through the evening to and fro, and little bats don't tell. Thank you.